So Winona's character rework update dropped last week. It added a few new perks to the character, mostly revolving around automated catapults and light sources, both of which are powered by two different generators. In trade-off, Winona now loses 5 hunger once per minute while crafting, as well as having a 0.5 second craft speed, except when she's hungry, in which case crafting and building will take 1.5 seconds. Now let me just get this out of the way. This update and the subsequent balance update have been amazing. They have really changed how Winona is viewed as part of the game. She's no longer that character who was added just for lore. Now she actually serves a proper purpose in the game, other than just being an exposition spouting storing machine. So in this video, I'm going to briefly go over each of Winona's buildings and her downside, and talk about their positives and negatives, and how each of them could be changed in order to make Winona even better. And yeah, this video is probably going to sound repetitive, probably even akin to Winona needs a buff, but let me just say that while what we have received so far is great, that doesn't mean it's perfect. There's nothing inherently wrong with these changes at all, but there are still some additions or modifications that could be made. Winona's generator. Winona's generator in itself serves no purpose other than powering other devices, so there isn't heaps to talk about here. Basically, the generator is crafted with 1 duct tape, 2 logs, and 2 nitre. It provides power to catapults and spotlights built in its radius, using nitre as fuel. The generator's power depletes faster the more devices are connected to it. So yeah, that's the thick and thin of the basic generator. There are 2 clear ideas revolving around it. To serve a purpose as a basic generator, until the player gets their hands on the second tier version, and also to serve as another use for Nitre, and it pretty much serves these 2 purposes well. It's a great Nitre eater, consuming 1 piece for almost a day of charge with no devices attached. This structure certainly gives Nitre a lot more weight in terms of usefulness. One might even argue that it uses too much. This is why the G.E.M.erator is generally a better long-term option to the generator, and I see no problem with that. Of course, if you have some spare Nitre in the late game, there's no reason to not use it for power. In terms of suggestions, I've seen an idea being thrown around on the forums. Give the generators an ability to boost non-winona structures in their radius, such as ice boxes, non-magic research stations, ice flingomatics, etc. This would be a cool addition to Winona. It would give her even more usefulness to her in general, and not just specific to her own creations. The only problem here is that her generators could easily become too powerful. Many of the ideas that are being thrown around for boosts are incredible trade-offs for a material as humble as Nitre. So in retrospect, maybe not. Winona's G.E.M.erator. This is pretty much the same story as the Nitre generator. The G.E.M.erator powers Winona's devices in exchange for gems, and is crafted with 1 trusty tape, 2 boards, and 2 electrical doodads. Unlike the regular generator, this one is much more resource efficient, 3 gems lasting 6 whole days, with no devices attached. In the long term, the G.E.M.erator is the better choice when it comes to power options. You're a lot less likely to run out of power mid-fight, and once you have amassed lots of gems from hound waves, you will likely have enough gems to power devices for most purposes. You could even set up a Varg or Dragonfly farm in order to obtain a steady flow of gems. Regardless, I think one of the main problems with the G.E.M.erator is the lack of incentive to use gems other than blue to power it. Blue is currently the most viable gem to use, as it's a common drop from hound waves, and isn't used to make a resurrection item like the red gem is. Since all the gems function similarly, you're almost never going to see anyone use gems other than red or blue for powering the generator, which leads to a possible feature idea: different effects depending on which gem is inserted. There is just so many ideas revolving around this concept. There really needs to be a reason to actually use other gems for power. This structure is probably the least useful out of Winona's powered devices. The spotlight is crafted with 1 flex tape, 2 gold nuggets, and some fireflies. At the cost of power, it provides light in a small radius around 1 player. The spotlight has a range of about 2 fire pits, and it prioritizes the illumination of players who are not already being targeted by a spotlight. Out of all of Winona's devices, the spotlight is the one that players are least likely to craft. It uses too much of a medium rare resource in order to justify its effective uptime. The fire pit generally does a better job in terms of fuel, and the fact that you can see more than 3 feet in front of yourself. There are a couple of suggestions floating around in order to improve it. First of all, the gem-related suggestions revolving around the G.E.M.erator. Apart from that though, there are still some changes that could be made. A possibility is to make the spotlight even smarter than it currently is. If it's daytime, or if it's nighttime and every player in its radius is illuminated by any light source, the spotlight will not illuminate anything. If a player enters its radius during nighttime with no light sources equipped, the spotlight will quickly target that player, potentially saving them. Generators connected to the spotlight will still consume power as normal, otherwise it could potentially be a free safety net for darkness. In my opinion, this change alone would be enough to make the spotlight more useful in conjunction with other light sources, but still not overshadowing them. Winona's Catapult. Well, this is what you've all been waiting for. The catapult is the most powerful, and subsequently the most controversial, of all of Winona's devices. This thing is even being compared to Wickerbottom's books, and rightfully so, as it can allow for some highly cheap cheese tactics and easy boss farming strategies. It's crafted with 1 scotch tape, 3 twigs, and 15 stones. When powered, it periodically flings boulders at enemies, which deal 42.5 damage in a small AoE. The catapult can be attacked by enemies, and as such has 400 health and repairs itself at a rate of 8 hit points every 10 seconds. The catapults are essentially the selling point of this update, and with good reason. However, they could still use with a few tweaks. As for what those tweaks are, I wouldn't say I'm sure. Many have been suggesting a nerf to the catapults, but this likely wouldn't be suitable. Remember, Wickerbottom's books still exist, and besides, for all we know, every Don't Starve character could turn out to be like Winona is now in their upcoming updates. I'm not suggesting that would be a good thing, but still, it's worth considering. Anyway, there is one small thing that I would change about the catapults currently: remove their health regen. Do they really need it? They are non-organic and non-magic. Take a look at the Houndius. The Houndius deserves health regen. It's crafted with 2 boss items and a rare material. The catapults, on the other hand, are just made with sticks and tape. Additionally, removal of the health regen means that they would require more maintenance, something which an item of this power surely needs. The catapults can be repaired with packaging tape, but not normal healing items like a Houndius can. An ammunition cost is also in the realm of possibility, but this would perhaps require too much babysitting and would consequently make the item less enjoyable to use. Hunger crafting. This is probably the weakest part of Winona's rework. Since the initial release, which made each craft cost a hefty 5 hunger, Winona now only loses 5 hunger every minute while crafting. Each craft resets this timer. Now it doesn't feel like enough of a downside, considering Winona's immense offensive capabilities. I think it's safe to say that Winona needs a completely new downside, one that actually enforces a playstyle along with her upsides. Which brings me to the other main problem: no reason to play. Winona's other issue is that there's no real incentive to keep playing as her after you've built her catapults and generators initially, as other characters can still maintain them. This problem's effect was lessened when her hunger loss was made less severe, but regardless, an easy solution is to make the catapults require more maintenance. Perhaps they can only be repaired by Winona, using her tape, or Winona has a better fuel efficiency when adding Nitre to generators. In addition to this, Winona could also use another perk which is passive and does not revolve around a structure that can function normally by itself, in order to make constantly playing as her more consistent and enjoyable. And that pretty much ties up my suggestions. Like my ideas? Think they're stupid? Please let me know in the comments. With context and reasoning, of course. Don't just say that they're stupid.